Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Blood on the Razor Wire, where we bring it real and we bring it raw. I got a special guest today, a guy that was a mentor to me and many other people in prison. He started out with a life sentence. He's out of Charlotte, North Carolina. By the grace of God, he's now free. I'm going to introduce Cedric Dean. Cedric, welcome to the show. Tell the people about yourself, where you're from, and your situation.
Man, it's a pleasure to be here, and I just want to start this out by giving all praise and credit to God, because Chad and I used to be in the chapel area, and we'd be praying and saying, looking at each other as we walk the track, saying God is going to make it possible for us to be free. So, you know, our story started in the midst of the crack epidemic, where you had the crack versus powder cocaine and all of that good stuff, but the penalties were 100 times worse. And you had, it was a byproduct of the land bias situation that created the crack situation. But then you had the 94 crime bill that created the mandatory minimum problem. So Chad and I were caught up in both situations because we both had the mandatory minimum. I received a 5-year mandatory minimum for 924C firearm charge. And they would stack that on top. And in my situation, the judge said, I'm sentencing you to life. But if you die and come back to life, you still got the 5 years that had been stacked on top for the 924C charge. Never denied the fact that I sold crack. I stood in front of a state courtroom and pled guilty for that. But the feds indicted me for the same drugs. And, you know, by the grace of God, I was able to meet Chad Marks while at USP Lee. And then we reunited at Raybrook. And, you know, us being able to work together as freedom fighters and do legal work, bounce stuff off each other, we were able to gain our freedoms. And I just, you know, I leave it at that.
Cedric, let me ask you a question, because you had a life sentence. How old were you when you were sentenced to life?
I was 22 years old. You know, I represented myself because I literally argued that crack and powder was the same drug, which we know today has been proven to be a fact. The judge said, don't you understand that a man who represents himself has a fool for a client? It's like a doctor trying to perform surgery who never went to medical school. But the reality was, I grew up in the streets. I knew crack because I sold crack. I knew powder. I knew it was the same drug. So I went in the courtroom and I couldn't find a lawyer to make that argument. So I said, I will say it myself to the jury. And I represented myself. But I was 22 years old when I did that.
22 years old, and you go to federal prison with a life sentence. How did that feel when you walked into federal prison with a life sentence? How'd you feel inside?
Well, ironically, you know, in 1995, that's when the Sentencing Commission shot down the crack law. And going in, you had all of these negative thinkers who would say, you know you're going to die in prison, right? You know you're going to die in here. Congress just shot that down. And I say, no, you may die, but I'm going to be free. So I made reentry a priority from day one. And I got in that law library. The same law library I found you in, you know. And that's why I stayed at. That was my refuge. That was my restorative hope. Because as the more I seen cases, the more I seen the judicial system evolving into the direction of where they saw it the same way that we saw it, that crack and powder was the same drug. And the judges had a problem with some of those penalties. So, it was difficult in the beginning.
Let me ask you this. Being that you were a young man, you went to prison with a life sentence, I know you've seen some people in there that had given up, that were probably the same age as you. Did you see some young men in there that just didn't care no more and start doing things that they probably shouldn't have been doing? Did you see that in there?
Every day. I mean, ironically, me coming in there, and you'll be able to edit this right here out, Chad. Let me let this phone. Hang that phone up.
Yeah.
You'll be able to edit it out, bro. I'm at my mama's house watching my grandma. I apologize.
You're all right.
So ask that question again.
So being that you went to prison as a young man, Cedric, right? You're 22 years old. You walk into prison with a federal life sentence. Did you see a lot of young men that went in there just like you, that just gave up, that didn't care? If you've seen that, tell us what type of things were they doing in prison, these guys that gave up?
I'm glad you asked that question, Chad. Because when I walked into prison, right, at 22 years old, I seen the older guys trying to put knives in the young guys' hands and was trying to use them as gun holsters, I used to call them, because they wouldn't want to hold their own knives and take the risk of being in shakedowns and stuff like that. They wanted to have someone that could do that for them and could get the incident reports. So I walked into the Federal Bureau of Prisons and I immediately had to fight against the prison politics that, led to a lot of people being murdered. A lot of people who came in with a little bit of time ended up having a lot of time. And in some cases not even being able to leave out because they didn't know how to adjust to the prison politics. So I immediately had to not only be the leader that I was born to be, but I had to adopt the leaders breed leaders mentality. And that's what, you and I used to do. We used to teach other youngsters that was coming in how to be their own man, how to be their own leader, how to think for themselves if they wanted to ever be free again.
You mentioned that you had seen some murders. I know when we were in USP Lee, right? Maximum security prison over there in Virginia. Do you remember that situation? There was a situation with the Crips where the two guys went on a mission. They were going to stab another guy, and the one homeboy swung the knife. He missed the dude he came to get and stabbed his partner. Do you remember that?
Yeah, the boy about to go home. I mean, the one who ended up getting killed was about to go home, and the one who did the killing was about to go home. So it was a crazy situation because you used to have guys that came in, and the most important word in the English language has two letters. N-O. No. And a lot of those youngsters, they couldn't say the word no. So as a result of that, they end up catching cases. And a lot of times it was fatal situations. And when you talk about blood on the razor wire, you talk about the murders, when I was at Big Sandy, they had several murders. When I was at Pollock, USP, they had 11 murders in 1 year. And the authorities, they didn't have a clue about what to do.
Hold on.
Come to the Chad Marks and the Cedric Deans on the compound.
Let me ask you this, Cedric. You said there was 11 murders in 1 year. Can you say that again for the viewers?
11 murders in 1 year at USP Pollock. And the reason that happened was this was around 2007 between 2005 and 2007, around that time where they had closed down ADX. So it was Mary. And when they had closed down a lot of these maximum places, they started dropping them at Poly. So now you got all these different people who they had 2 murders in one day. They had a black guy had stabbed a white guy. Then another white guy ended up stabbing the black guy who had killed the white guy. So 2 in one day. I mean, this was the animalistic type of culture and environment that we was forced to live in.
Crazy. I mean, I remember that situation in Pollock. The white kid that got murdered was they called him Bubba Sparks. He was out of Alabama. I think he had 80. He had 87 days left to go home, and the dude came in and pretty much stabbed him for no reason. There was an issue over the TV, and he said, "You know what? The first white dude I see, I'm stabbing him," and he stabbed him. And then the white dudes retaliated, stabbed the black dude, and just, man, outrageous. Some people think that federal prison is camp fed, that it's a nice place and we're eating, steak and we got cable TV and we're just playing tennis. Tell the people how it really is, Cedric. You've been there. You spent 20-something years of your life in there. Tell the people.
So let's stay at Big Sandy for a second. I seen at Big Sandy a person get murdered over a roll of toilet paper.
What?
A roll of toilet paper. About to go home. But he was the orderly for the counselor and pushing the cart with the toilet paper on it. And you know how it is when you're in the units, Chad. Somebody want an extra roll of tissue, but the counselor, instead of letting the counselor say, "No, you can't get it," you got the orderly saying, "Man, no, I ain't getting it." And now the other person saying, "Oh, you want to be the police? Okay, I'm going to show you what happens being the police." And this person didn't make it home because he got stabbed over a roll of toilet paper. Majority of the murders that I seen, and I can't even count how many I seen in the 22 years and 11 months that I was incarcerated in the Federal Bureau of Prison. They was over quarter soups. They was over pieces of fried chicken. Somebody walking in the child hall line and saying, "Give me an extra piece of chicken," and they saying no. And when they got back to the unit, there was a penalty, a price that they had to pay, which was their life for not wanting to give them a piece of chicken.
So, a piece of chicken.
When you talk about character education development, you talk about leaders breed leaders, the classes that we taught. The reason we had to do that is because these individuals didn't see each other as human beings. You have them coming from Chicago, New York, LA, all the gang capitals of the United States of America. And then you're just saying, y'all gotta coexist. So you got people that's from their own areas, and what most people don't realize, 90% of Crips kill Crips. 90% of Bloods kill Bloods. It's your own people. So when you was in the Federal Bureau of Prison, it's more likely that an Aryan brother will kill an Aryan brother, or a dirty white boy kill a dirty white boy, than it is for somebody black to do. So, that was the prison politics of that gang culture that we was forced to have to address. And I think, it was a whole lot of bad stuff, but I think that we were able to turn around some of that.
A lot of people probably don't know, even though I put it out there sometimes, you were my mentor. You were the person that put me on the right track to get out of prison. Had I not listened to you, I would have never wrote my judge. And I remember one day you told me, "Hey man, write the judge. Tell him all the things you're doing." And I said, "Nah, I ain't writing them." But you convinced me to do that. And eventually that was the door opening for me to eventually get out of prison. while you were in prison, you taught a lot of dudes a lot of things, right? Character education. You helped people see that their freedom was worthwhile, that it wasn't worth losing, right? And how long you been out of prison now, Cedric?
I've been out. I've been out since November 17, but I want to say something.
Hold on. What year was that? Because the people need to know what year.
November 2017.
Okay.
Now, one thing I want to say is, Cedric Dean and Chad Marks were no angels. And we had some horrible past. And I used to rob and shoot drug dealers. You know, I let Chad tell you about some of the things that he. I remember. You hear my grandma? My grandma said, I remember. But I'm going to tell you something. When you go in the courtroom, the only thing the prosecutor's going to bring up continuously is all the things that you had done in the past. So, you had individuals who had committed acts of violence, that had done things in prison and out of prison. And there was a situation where, you know what? I want to do something to show and prove, because I had a guy who was my mentor, and his name was Lawrence Little, and he said they gonna change the crack law one day. But when they change that law, are you gonna take a bunch of incident reports saying you have been stabbing and beating up people? Or you gonna take some certificates showing that you changed some life and that you changed the lives of others? So he's saying your case, right? You used to rob and shoot drug killers. So you're gonna have to take more classes than any person in the history of the BOP if you want to get off that life sentence. And that's what I did. And when I met you, you, Chad, I seen I seen a lot of what was in me and you, man, because both of us slick. We know how to talk. You know what I'm saying? We smart. We just learn how to rechannel our energy that we used to put in negative stuff, because we was very successful doing negative stuff. But now we're very successful doing positive stuff, and it's no wonder, because we rechanneling that energy. But when I seen you, man, and I seen your passion for law, and I seen how for hours and hours and hours you would sit down and go through a 2255 in a way that no attorney in America could, because they don't have time to focus on one case. But when I seen the way that you would take that personally, and you would call me out there, we would go over stuff, I mean, that's what really made me want to pour into you, because what I seen, brother, and I'm just being real, right? I seen you pouring into everybody else. But it's like you take a cup, right? And you was full. But every time I seen you, you was pouring into everybody else, which was making you empty. And that made me want to say, you know what? While you pouring into everybody else, let me pour into you.
I appreciate that. I appreciate you, and I appreciate your friendship, man. And you've done a lot of things for a lot of people, man. And I really appreciate you, man. I mean that.
I tell you, the proudest moment, man, of my post-incarceration was pulling up to that airport, man, and seeing you get in my car. I mean, the fact that we had cried together, man, fought together, did everything together, man, and used to walk them tracks in prison, bro. And then to see you get off that plane right here, I mean, can't nobody tell me there ain't no God. You know, and we always tell them in their classroom, right? You gotta believe when nobody else believe. When you the only person in the world that believe.
I know there were times where, I'm serving a 40-year sentence and I was shaky. And I would ask you, your camera went off, Cedric. Okay. There were times when we would walk that track and I would ask you, say, man, I'd be stressed. I'd say, You think we're ever going to get out of here? And you would tell me that. If you don't believe it, no one else will. And you got me to start believing that someday I was going to get out of prison. And it became the reality. I was able to fly to Charlotte, North Carolina and see you as a free man and you see me as a free man and just enjoy life. And like that song says, live my best life. And a lot of this is because of you. You helped put me on the right track. You got me to stop selling drugs in prison. You got me to stop being involved in gang violence in prison. You made me see that picture, man, and I certainly appreciate that, Cedric.
Well, Chad, you brought up me telling you to write the judge. And I'm going to tell you, right, it's like we had to defend ourselves. That's what we learned about the law. People are constantly prosecuting us, for the past. So what I told you, and I want to share that with people because you got a loved one. I know people that's watching this have loved ones in prison, right? That who have passed, like Cedric Dean and Chad Marks. But when you start doing good things, I had published 20 books in prison. You think the prosecutor spoke about that? No. But my judge pointed that out because I had been writing over and over. I sent them every last certificate. And I knew that day would come. And you know what he did? He didn't admonish me. He admonished them. Because he said the only thing you want to talk about is the incident reports this man that got and what he did in the past. Said it's been over 6 years since he had any problems. But let's talk about all this other stuff that he's doing that I'm looking at right here. And that was the difference with you, man. You were the empirical evidence. You were the evidence of change. And I wanted you to have a fair opportunity. That's why I told you, every certificate, send it to him. Everything you're doing, every accomplishment you make, send it to him. And then because they need to see that you are a human being that matters. And it's like we always hear all lives matter. Well, guess what? All people in prison should matter. Because a lot of times we feel like we don't matter the way that we're prosecuted, the way that people don't want to forgive our debt. We pay our debt to society. But don't nobody want to look at the good that we're doing. You ain't going to get no pats on the back all the time. But I'm glad we able to give each other the flowers and the accolades that, we can do today.
Cedric, I want people to know you've been out since November 2017, right? I want you to tell the people you went from robbing drug dealers with a life sentence to working your way down by doing your own law work, getting yourself out of prison. Tell the people what you're doing now in Charlotte, North Carolina, and all over the country.
Well, first I want to say this. It's two people, Amy Pope and Malik King, that was very instrumental in providing us with the resource information that we needed to fight the government. We would sit back and it would be cases that we needed, information that we needed, and we would send it to these people and countless other people. But I just want to highlight them because those were two pivotal people that believed and provided Cedric Dean, Chad Marks with a platform.
For sure.
So what I was able to do is I was able to get people like Chris Bowman to record me. And I would do videos of me mentoring people in society. And I would be a keynote speaker at domestic violence wear many tags events, Washington, D.C. based organization. And I would mentor young people from prison via like what we doing now. But it wasn't Skype. It was just them recording me on the phone talking, and then they would just play some B-roll with my voice over that. Well, I used to sit in prison with Chad, and we used to watch Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and we used to watch all these Barack Obama, all these prolific speakers. And I used to look at Chad and I say, man, that's going to be us when we get out. We can do the same thing, because we are lived experience. People talk about us, but let us talk about us and, go out there and be able to make a living. So today, I travel the country, making a difference. Yes, I make $1 as I make a difference. But, I have my own recording studio. My first job out of prison, you know who I work for? The Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. Now, people will be like, what? He went out 7 days from prison working, but what the hell is going on? You know why? Because I wanted to be able to do what me and Chad did in those classrooms in the Bureau of Prisons. But I knew the only way that I could get in anybody's school was with the police. Because everybody would be afraid, scared to death for a Cedric Dean, a person that used to rob and shoot drug dealers. And you know what I say? I went from shooting drug dealers to shooting movies, shooting documentaries. That's what I do today. See, it's other ways to shoot. But the point that I'm trying to make is that I was able to go into the schools with the chief of police. And now I can go into any school. Now I'm on the boards with the superintendent, with the city manager, the county manager. I've been to the State of the Union with our Congresswoman, Alma Adams. Thank you. I'm in direct partnership with the District Attorney's Office in Mecklenburg County. I work directly with the reentry coordinator for the U.S. Probation Office. These are collaborative partnerships. These are the same type of partnerships that Chad and I was able to develop on the compound so we could get resources in there for us to better prepare ourselves for society. Now we just doing it because it was a marketable skill. So it may be a surprise to y'all to see Chad Marks behind the mic, but he was behind the mic a long time before the day, right in the classrooms, when it went number 10, 15, 20, 30 prisoners, when he was doing the alternative to violence seminars. I mean, it was a lot that led up to today. And I just, I want to just really, man, give you your flowers while you still living, brother, because it was a lot of people, right, Chad, that I tried to point to, right? They wasn't ready. They wasn't ready. You understand what I'm saying?
I hear you.
They didn't accept the call. And guess what they at? Still in prison. Still in prison, man, because they didn't believe that if they changed. You used to always hear me say, man, be the change you want to see in the BOP, and you became that. And now you the change you want to see in society. So I said a lot, man, but it comes from my heart, brother.
I appreciate it, man. So before we close, right, I want you to, because you're the guy that taught me a lot of things. If you could talk to your younger self or give a message to the youth, what would be your message to the youth about prison and crime and changing your life? Tell the people. There's kids listening to this. There's parents sitting their kids down to listen to Blood on the Razor Wire TV. What would you tell them?
The first thing I would tell them is, you don't have to fake it to make it. What Chad and myself had to learn how to do was make it without faking it. A lot of people get killed in places like Big Sandy. When you see and hear blood on the razor wire, it's because people out there faking. They ain't keeping it real. So the number one rule to life is to be true to self, to be real. There was a person inside of me, right? That was an educator. That was an author. That was a person inside of Chad. That was a lawyer, an author, an educator, a motivational speaker, a podcast, director. All of the things that he's doing today, but you know what? Why do we have to go to the BOP to bring that out of us? Why we didn't have an equal opportunity to access those type of programs that we was able to access in the BOP? So, what I would say to the parents, what I would say to the principals, what I would say to the police officers, the prosecutors, the probation officers, the preachers, I would say this right here. Make sure that you give your children, and when I say your children, the children in your community, the children that you work with every day, equal access to opportunity. When I was able to sit down in the ACE, which is the Adult Continuing Education classroom in prison, I was able to learn the 8 parts of speech. I was able to learn 14 punctuation marks is most relevant. I was able to learn grammatics. I was able to learn math, the same math and grammar that allowed Chad and myself to help over 500 individuals get their GED. I did it. That's a major, major, major accomplishment that we were able to discover in prison. But why couldn't we have discovered that while we were free? Because we didn't get an equal opportunity to succeed. What we got was, you know what, you're going to be dead in jail by the time you turn 21. People prophesied that on our lives. So what I would say is, be more positive, be more proactive, and be more persevering. Because it takes patience. Remember that, right? You gotta be patient. People was patient with Cedric Dean and Chad Marks, and look at us now. And that's all I want you to do. I want you to be patient with those young people. And be more positive and proactive instead of reactive.
That's a good message, man. And Cedric, I just want to tell you, man, today that I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming on the show. Man, it's a blessing, man. And you always give words of wisdom to not only myself, but all the people that you interact with, man. We're going to close this thing out, man, where it's real, it's raw. Blood on the Razor Wire TV. Hit that subscribe button. We're out of here.